Quitting adult content can be quite difficult. I've helped thousands of men do it over the last 4 years, and I've seen so many success stories, but I've also seen men really slip and fall, especially after they've been going on a long streak for some time, and then they slip, they fall into some temptation, and then all of a sudden it's like binge, like 2-3 days, sometimes multiple times a day. It's like, how did I go from going so good to all of a sudden totally depleting myself and binging? Well, I'm gonna explain why that happens, and more importantly, how you can avoid it happening in your own journey. Let's get into it. Hi, my name is Nakula, and I help men master their S3X energy so that you can become a powerhouse both in and outside the bedroom and ultimately unleash all the gifts God has given you. You can start with the free transmutation guide. The link is in the description below. And at the end of this video, if you decide I really need some help, I really want to let this go forever, you can book a call with me. I'd love to connect with you and see how myself or one of my coaches can be of service to you. Now, when it comes to binges, especially after you've been on a long streak, you may wonder, why does that happen? It's important to understand what's going on, because what I found in my own journey of quitting adult content is that the more I understood what was going on from a biological level or from a mental perspective, then the better I was equipped to actually handle what was going on. So here's what happens. When you quit any kind of stimulus, drugs, alcohol, social media, and especially adult content. Now, out of all of those, adult content is the highest stimulus, because S3X activity or stimulation is the highest stimulus for the human being. It's the highest stimulus for the mind. It literally gets us into action. That's why you click, even though you don't want to. You're like, okay, I'm gonna do it. That's why you can't just white knuckle it. You have to literally rewire your brain. You can't just be like, oh, I'm just gonna stop. I mean, maybe 0.3% of the population might be able to do that, fine. But generally for 99.9 whatever percentage of guys, the majority of us, we actually have to go through a rewiring process. Cravings and urges will come because your brain is used to getting this high amount of stimulus. And you have to recognize that there's an unnatural amount of stimulus that's given to your brain or released of dopamine when you are watching adult content. Now, because your brain is getting used to this high level of stimulus, when you're not watching adult content, especially for those first week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you're gonna want that stimulus back. In fact, even just the thought of watching it is going to release a little dopamine. That's why the anticipation is often better than the actual act. How many guys that I've talked to, it's like, whether it's adult content or chasing a woman, they're like, the actual lead up is better than the actual deed. The finding the video is better than actually watching the video. Why? Because you're actually starting to release dopamine ahead of the act, because dopamine is a motivator. It's like when you start to think of like some food and then all of a sudden you're like, I think I'm gonna get up and go to the fridge, because you're thinking about it and it's releasing dopamine, which is trying to get you to go act to get that stimulus. So when you understand that, you should recognize that the first place to cut any kind of addiction or unwanted habit or behavior is in the mind as soon as the thought comes. Now, I teach 21 techniques to reprogram the mind as part of my training course, so that as soon as you recognize, oh, my mind is going somewhere that I don't want it to go, you can stop that. You can literally say this out loud. You could try it right now. Think of something and then go, stop, say it, stop. And what you'll notice is that there's gap between your thoughts. That gap is the perfect time to actually think of something else and start to rewire a new dopamine response. I'm gonna get into that. So the first thing is you gotta recognize that your cravings are actually a good thing. because your brain is starting to like unwind itself or unwire itself from the stimulus. So the stimulus, the reason you're wanting it is because you want to be stimulated. That in itself is not bad. Now you have to recognize, okay, that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And you've got to exercise enough self-control and awareness and have some techniques to work with to rewire your brain. Cravings are a sign that your body and brain is detoxing. So when you feel the cravings, celebrate it. Oh, I'm craving to watch it right now. That means I'm detoxing. And by the way, you can do that with anything. You can do it with sugar. You could do it with social. Oh, I'm craving to. That means I'm looking for stimulus. Now, once you actually recognize that, and you recognize that the fantasy is better than the reality. I was talking with a student the other day and he said that, his thing is webcam girls and he's been doing excellent. He stayed away. And he said, what I've recognized is that the last time he did it, he felt so gross. He felt just totally ashamed. He felt guilt. He was totally low energy. And he said, the mind makes it seem like it's gonna be so good and fun, but that's because it's just getting all this dopamine and stimulation. But then the actual act is depleting, and depending on your situation can have serious consequences. That's why you never want to allow an addicted mind to actually guide you. It sounds brilliant in your head. It sounds reasonable. You can use all your logic and reason to justify it. But an addicted mind is an unintelligent mind. So not only can you listen to yourself when you're addicted, don't listen to other people who have addictions, because anything they're telling you is actually coming from a dull mind. You need to get sober in all ways to really unleash your power, intelligence, and gifts. Now, here's what happens is as you do anything with high stimulation, especially like adult content, that is like super unnatural amounts, up to 200% has been measured of dopamine spikes. That's unnatural amounts. You become dopamine dependent. And that's what largely the world is right now. That's why so many people are addicted. And so many people also then feel depressed and have anxiety and social anxiety and so many issues, is because their dopamine, they're just way too stimulated in an unnatural way. Never in our generations before us had this much unnatural stimulation. I mean, we used to just watch the sunrise and be like, oh my gosh. I got a buddy, he's a professional fighter, and he said, and he's super clean. And he said, that back in the day, if like our ancestors, if we saw a patch of blueberries, he's like, we'd be like kids in those blueberries, like, like candy, like a kid in a candy store. But watch how people react. You give them some blueberries, they're like, why? It's because they're dulled out. Same with a woman. A woman, you could just see a woman. Again, my student was talking about the webcams. He said the other day, this is funny. He said, we were laughing. He's like, man, I gotta tell you this. And he's a professional, right? He's like really successful guy. I say he's, around a lot of professionals, doctors and nurses and such. And he said, man, I saw this woman. He says, not traditionally attractive, kind of, bigger lady, not his style generally, right? And he said, I sat in my car and I watched her go. And he says, it wasn't lusty, but I was just watching her. And he's like, I got the hardest erection for the next 15 minutes. He says, that hasn't happened to me in years. In years, could I just look at a woman who was traditionally not attractive and be totally aroused? I know what he's talking about. Guys who get clean, no. It's like you go back to being like in middle school where just a woman walks by and you're like, you can just feel it go through your body. Why? Because you're clean. And so you don't need all of this craziness and fantasies and all of this nonsense to stimulate you. It means you're actually healthy. So because you're dopamine dependent, you're gonna get those cravings and urges. So then what happens is everything begins to seem boring and dull because you're now dopamine deficient. And because you're dopamine deficient, everything is running boring. But what you have to do is wait and start to reprogram your mind. So here's how you do it. Next time you have a thought of watching adult content, you're gonna say, stop, out loud, stop. And that's gonna create that gap in thoughts. And in that gap in thoughts is your opportunity to go and start thinking of something else that gives you dopamine. Working out, hitting the gym, doing your creative projects. Now, it won't give you as much dopamine as adult content because that's unnatural, but it'll start to fulfill you. One of the best things that I've heard is actually skydiving. Now, most of us can't just be like jump in the plane and skydive, but taking a cold shower can also do it. Going for a run, doing something that where you accomplish something, getting something off your checklist to do, reading a book. And actually what you'll notice is as that time goes on and you continuously do it, you need less and less dopamine to feel stimulated, and then reading a book becomes exciting. You know, I always tell people, and my guys, my students, I say, if you're at McDonald's and have to order something, order the best thing on the menu. So order their salad. You know, if you're at the worst place, then order the best of the worst. So if you have to watch something stimulating, don't watch adult content. Go watch like a crazy movie with lots of bombs or something like this. Like watch something that's stimulating but not adult content. Just start to bring it down a notch. Play some video games. And then over time, do the same thing with that and start to continuously replace your external stimulation. And what's going to eventually happen is you're going to reset your body, you're going to purify your mind, and life itself will seem so exciting. The blueberries, the sunrise, reading a book, accomplishing your goals. It's going to give you such great stimulation that you're going to lose the taste for all of that other stuff that's taking you off track. The reason that you get the chaser effect or that binge afterwards is because once you give into it, your body is going to want it again and again and again. And then normally guys will just act upon that until they become so dopamine deficient where they don't feel like doing anything. They exhaust themselves out. You know what I'm talking about, where you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't watch anymore. I can't eat any more sugar. I can't. And that's no good. That's unhealthy. That's a very negative cycle because now you're taking yourself to the max and therefore you have to swing back to this low and feel depressed. So to stop those cycles, which is stopping you from just progressing forward in your life, you've got to be able to rewire your brain. So it's not just about stopping or white knuckling it or counting the days. It's about actually rewiring your brain to live a life that stimulates you in a natural way. That's what I help my students do. I would love to help you do that as well if this resonates with you. I hope this video helped. Leave your questions below. I'd love to support you and do content for you. Again, go ahead and take the free transmutation guide. And if you want to connect with me, go book some time on my schedule. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you never miss a video. I'll see you on the next video. Sending you much love.